Yeah, I did change, and I'm really glad I changed.
This one's wife. Do they understand the reality of their situation? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Across various forums, I regularly see people who are perplexed by the behaviours of Prince Harry and this one's wife. They pose a question. It's a legitimate and understandable and honest question. But they don't understand or grasp why, particularly this one's wife, behaves in the way that she does. There are some commentators in response to the question who do show that they've grasped how her behaviour is influenced by her narcissism. But many people still remain bewildered. And that is why, given that this individual is so high profile, so talked about, so written about, that I continue to create material to address these questions so that not only do people understand why she does as she does, but also so that they understand how narcissism influences so much in the world with regard to the behaviour of certain individuals, which impacts upon so many other people. What is the situation of the Sussexes? Well, I think a fair summation is to say that in this point in time, they are largely unpopular. Yes, they still have their devotees, members of the Sussex squad, paid bots that continue to spout out nonsense on various platforms, demonstrating a slavish devotion to the cause. But there's a lot of people who are simply not interested, and there's also a lot of people who, as the years have rolled by and as the evidence has mounted up, give them enough rope, as I regularly explain, have begun to realise, actually, she and him are not particularly pleasant people to be around, and this has impacted upon their popularity. They've seen the way that they have repeatedly played the victim, the way that they've smeared other people, the way that lies have been told, the way that they've not reacted in an honest and earnest fashion despite claiming to do so, the fact that they appear to grift with regard to making money, that they have no appreciable talent, that they leech off others. And a combination of all of those factors has placed them in a position of unpopularity. Thus, their situation is they are not popular. But there's more to it than that. Initially, as I've explained before, things were going well for them. The United States welcomed them. Certain power players saw a use for the Sussexes in their own plans and embraced them. They got mega money deals. But it didn't take long for a combination of laziness, incompetence, absence of talents, and this one's wife's narcissism to impact upon those early successes, with the result now that they have significant overheads, no appreciable income, an expiring Netflix deal, and no major deals in the offing. American Riviera Orchard Retirement Homes is doing nothing as we now enter the 4th month after it was launched. No new content has been created. The cookery show that has been spoken about as being filmed hasn't manifested. After all, what's the point if there's no cross-selling to American Riviera Orchard Retirement Homes? Thus, their situation is one of a lack of popularity, a popular royal family, and increasing financial pressure as a consequence of the failings in relation to their various endeavours. Thus, with that being a fair summation of their current situation, do they understand and appreciate that is the situation that they are in? Let's begin with Harry. Harry will recognise that things aren't as good as they could be. He will recognise that they're not popular. He will recognise certain financial issues. He will also have recognised the poor treatment that he has received at times from this one's wife. But we're not talking about their relationship here, but the gruesome twosome's realisation of their circumstances vis-à-vis the world. Although he's not the most perceptive of individuals, nor the brightest, even Harry can see that they're not popular, and he can see that there are problems in relation to the business front, if we can call it that. However, he is somebody that has existed his entire life where he has been bailed out, supported, covered, shielded by others. And that has formed part of who he is. That whilst he can recognise an absence of popularity, he recognises the criticism, he will not, of course, accept much of it because he's been tainted by the views of his wife. And he recognises that there may be some financial problems awaiting them. The full impact and seriousness has not come to bear upon him because he simply hasn't had to deal with reality particularly much in his life. He grew up in the gilded environment of the royal family. Not his fault. He didn't choose where he was stationed in life. But nevertheless, he's never needed to want for anything in terms of people doing things for him, making his meals, providing his clothing, telling him where he needed to be, that he was always financially provided for. Yes, we know he suffered tragedy, as he often reminds us, with regard to the death of his mother, milking that particular scenario. But the fact is, whilst Harry can recognise that things aren't that good, he doesn't truly appreciate what it really means, because he's never really had to face that kind of difficulty on his own. Yes, he has had the very tragic circumstances of the loss of his mother, but that's isolated. He's never needed to properly work. He's never needed to think about how he's going to fund something. He's never really needed to think about the organisation of getting from A to B. Instructions are issued. People have suggested ideas to him. He's run with those ideas. He's basically been picked up and supported throughout the entirety of his life, which means he doesn't have a true appreciation of the real impact of the scenario that he finds himself in. And in essence, is most likely thinking to himself, well, it'll all turn out all right in the end. Papa will sort it out. Because that's invariably what has happened. Whenever difficulty has come his way, someone or something has stepped in to remedy the situation. And thus Harry will continue to believe that that's what will happen, rather than taking actual responsibility for sorting it out himself. Thus Harry sees that there are problems. He's not deluded to the extent that he doesn't see them, but he doesn't accept their applicability to the fullest extent, nor does he fully understand the gravity of the situation, because simply somebody else has always sorted out his mess. What about this one's wife? Well, there are some narcissists that are so deluded that they simply don't see that there is a problem. She doesn't fall into that category. The reason being is that there is so much evidence that exists, and we know she looks at it as a consequence of the comments and actions that have been taken vis-à-vis certain YouTubers and people on X and so forth. We know that she monitors mainstream news. We know that she monitors social media. And therefore, she is aware of the lack of popularity that exists. She is also aware of the failings on the business front. So she knows those things exist. She's not deluded to them. But, and this is where her narcissism is at its fullest effect, she doesn't understand nor accept that she is what has caused it. If you were to sit down with a lesser narcissist and draw a line down a piece of paper, and on the left-hand side, put all of the people that you've ever fallen out with in your life, and on the right-hand side, put down all the people that the narcissist has fallen out with in their life, you would perhaps just have one name under your name, the name of the narcissist that you are currently involved with. Maybe if you'd had the misfortune to have other narcissists in your life, there could be 2 or 3 other names. But it would be a short list, because generally you don't spend your life having major fallouts with people. Underneath the lesser narcissist name would be your name and maybe 6 X's, the name of children, other family members, neighbours, former friends, colleagues, former colleagues, person who works in a shop, a teacher, a police officer. The list would go on and on. 30, 40, 50 different names. And if you were to sit down with the lesser and say, we've made a list of all the people that I've fallen out with and all the people that you've fallen out with, and your list is way, way, way longer than my list. What do you think of that? The lesser would not go, I'm the problem, aren't I? Because look how many people I've fallen out with. That tends to suggest that I'm the difficulty here. No. It simply doesn't compute. The lesser would simply go, they're all arseholes, and walk off, dismissing it, because the narcissism tells them that everybody else is the problem and not them. Anybody else looking at that would go, well, it's clear you're the problem. Look how many people you've fallen out with. But that thought doesn't even manifest with the narcissist. It doesn't compute. Take a mid-range narcissist, such as this one's wife, and she would go through every single name under that list, disputing, first of all, whether there's actually been a falling out in the first place, denial, and then, if she were not able to demonstrate that, she would explain how it was the fault of that other person. My father abused me when I was younger. That's why I don't have anything to do with him. My half-sister, well, she's a nut job who's only in it for the money. Ditto my half-brother. That former friend, well, they told stories about me, so I don't bother with them anymore. That member of staff, they didn't do as they were supposed to. So what was I meant to do? Tolerate that? No. And she would work through each and every name on that list, either denying that she'd fallen out with them in the first place, or where she accepted that she had, she would explain it away, of it being the fault of the other person. And even if you were to sit there and say to her, look, this one's wife, there's 60 names on that list. Exes, friends, family, colleagues, staff. You've fallen out with all of them. Doesn't that tell you that you're the problem because you're the common theme in all of this? You might as well be speaking in Mandarin to her because it won't compute. Her narcissism will simply reject it. It will turn around and say, no, it's not your fault. You're the amazing this one's wife. And then would go through each member, each individual on that list and explain why it was their fault and not hers. Similarly, if you were to say to her, you're hugely unpopular, she would start off by disputing the extent of that unpopularity. If you were to put some articles in front of her, some polls, she might say, well, polls can give you any answer you want. They're clearly biased. Again, not her fault. And where she might accept that she's unpopular, she wouldn't go, I know I'm unpopular because of the way that I behave and the way that I conduct myself. I don't blame people for not liking me. She can't do that because her narcissism will not allow her to do it. Instead, well, those people are racist. They're bigots. They're against me. They're prejudiced. They listen to the propaganda put out by these YouTubers. They've been affected by the nonsense that the mainstream news spouts out against me. It's not my fault. And as a consequence, while she can see that she's unpopular, she sees that and it infuriates her, and she can see that there's a lack of opportunities on the business front, what she doesn't do is understand the reality in terms of it's her fault that has been generated by what she has done. The lack of popularity is down to the nastiness of individuals, and the unpopularity isn't as great as is being suggested. It's exaggerated. And with regard to the absence of successes, her narcissism will point to saying, well, we did have such successes, but there'll be historic ones. She'll bring up the past. And if you bring her back onto track and say, yes, but what about now? What are you going to be doing next? You'll be treated to amorphous comments such as exciting things in the pipeline, as she deflects. or references made to something vague in the future by way of future faking. Again, she's not able to confront and acknowledge that things are going desperately wrong for her, and it's all down to her. Where she would admit that something hasn't worked out, it'll be somebody else who's to blame. The publicist got it wrong. The marketing people didn't do their jobs. She'd been badly advised. It's never her fault. So the executive summary in relation to the question of do they understand the reality of their situation? It is, they are not so deluded as to not realise a lack of popularity and a lack of current success. They both can see that. With Harry, he doesn't fully appreciate its impact and remains in the belief that it will somehow get sorted out because everything always does. For this one's wife, she will dispute the depths of her unpopularity and the depths of the lack of success, and doesn't truly appreciate that it's all down to her, and that it's always somebody else's fault that she's not popular and not succeeding. Please make use of videos such as this to share in appropriate places to help people understand the questions that they pose, so that they can unfathom the behaviours of this one's wife vis-à-vis her narcissism. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.